Hello, welcome to Boston by Foot. We are looking out on a peaceful Boston harbor, and to the right of our picture there is a low gray building which is Commonwealth Pier. If we travel back in time to 1918, the scene would be quite different. This was a busy port bustling with wartime activity. In the fall of that year, the children of Boston would recite a cute little ditty. I had a little birdie, its name was Enza. I opened the window and influenza. This little ditty did not reflect the terror and suffering that played out as a result of the 1918 influenza epidemic. In August of 1918, World War I was winding down. Soldiers returning from the war in Europe arrived in Boston before returning to their homes throughout the country. In the harbor, a receiving ship to welcome the returning men, and Commonwealth Pier had been transformed into a massive barracks to house them. On August 27th, several sailors on the receiving ship reported to sickbay not feeling well. Within 3 days, 60 sailors were ill. 50 sailors were transferred to the Chelsea Naval Hospital across the harbor, and the hospital would quickly be overwhelmed by a flood of patients. These men had what would become known as the Spanish flu. By September 10th, the Boston Globe reported 1,100 cases of flu at Commonwealth Pier. This flu was terrifying and virulent, symptoms including rib-cracking cough and intense pain. Victims often died because their lungs were hemorrhaging and they were drowning on their own bodily fluids, and so their bodies had a deathly blue hue. It worked so fast that some woke up feeling fine in the morning and had died by the end of the workday. We typically think of the flu as being most serious for the elderly, the young, and those with pre-existing conditions. But the Spanish flu attacked those we would expect to be the hardiest population, young soldiers, young mothers and fathers. This strain of flu is believed to have used the body's immune system against it. An element of the immune system is called cytokines. These triggered the immune system to fight disease. The 1918 flu caused a cytokine storm, which caused an overactivation of the immune system, causing inflammation in the lungs, resulting in the deadly hemorrhaging. The cytokines are strongest in 20 to 40-year-old age group. The disease quickly spread from Boston Harbor to Fort Devens, an army base in western Massachusetts. It got so bad that Dr. Vaughan, the Surgeon General of the Army, was sent to investigate. He found a military base overwhelmed by this flu. Soldiers were dying in droves. He reported, "Dead bodies are stacked about the morgue like cordwood." Ultimately, 800 soldiers at the base died. Compounding the tragedy, many sailors and soldiers had already left, spreading out throughout the country, carrying the disease back to their communities. Family lore has it that this was particularly personal for my family. My great-uncle Harold was a soldier at Fort Devens. Word reached the family in Maine that he had contracted the flu, so the brothers traveled to the Devens to visit him, only to be told they were too late. He was one of those bodies stacked like cordwood. The brothers recovered the body and took it back to Maine, where Uncle Harold only lived about another 60 years. Turns out his doctor had been a little premature with his declaration of death. In September, the flu moved into the civilian population of Boston. And September 5th, the Department of Health declared an epidemic. Finally, on December 25th, public schools and public gatherings were canceled, an early example of social distancing. The cities like Boston saw normal services like telephones, mail delivery, and garbage pickup all fail due to a dearth of able-bodied workers. Still, Boston would suffer almost 4,800 deaths. Other cities were even slower than Boston to react, and the results were disastrous. Philadelphia held a large Liberty Loan parade to pay down the debt from World War I on September 28th, and the flu spread rapidly through the city's schools and businesses. Over 16,000 perished in the city. The city was left with so many orphans, the Bureau of Child Hygiene was overwhelmed. By the end of November, this episode of the flu largely ended. There would be another round in the spring, but not nearly as serious. It is estimated that 30 to 100 million people died worldwide. In the United States, 25 million contracted the flu, and 675,000 died. More than died in the battles of World War I. Evidence suggests the cities that practiced social distancing at the time fared much better than those that ignored the early warnings. A lesson we should all heed in the current crisis. Thank you for listening. We hope you can join us on an actual Boston by Foot tour very soon.